Tonight you're about to slip through a veil of time, where dawn brings no freshness, and every breath tastes of damp straw and distant smoke. You'll feel the weight of centuries in the cold air that clings to your skin, and hear echoes of footsteps on mud-clogged streets long forgotten. Here, cleanliness is a myth whispered by nobles and priests, and filth is woven into daily life. Tonight, let the darkness guide you gently into a world where survival meant stench, and every drop of water carried both hope and dread. You wake to the weight of damp straw pressing into your cheek, the sour tang of stale sweat coating your tongue. The morning light is a thin sliver through a tiny window, dust motes dancing like restless spirits. When you push yourself upright, the mattress sighs with trapped moisture, and your back aches from nights spent sleeping on cold, uneven boards. Beneath layers of foul linens, your first breath draws in the stench of yesterday's cooking fires, smoke lingering in the rafters, and something sharper, darker, the fetid echo of yesterday's chamber pot sloshed carelessly beneath the bed. You taste iron in the air. Your tunic clings to your skin, soaked through with a week's worth of labor and neglect. The coarse wool bites at your shoulders as you shrug it off. A cluster of lice scatters in your hair like tiny marionettes fleeing. A collapsing stage. You bend to feel the itch crawling across your scalp, your fingers brushing against scabs you don't remember earning. You scratch until your nails catch on dried blood, and for a moment, you aren't certain if it's grief or relief that floods your sight. Rising fully, you stumble toward the door. Each step against the plank floor sends a groan through the timbers, as if the very house is alive with complaint. Outside, the yard is already stirring. Chickens peck at yesterday's scraps in the mud. A pig grunts as it wallows in its bog. You step into the muck, and the cold mud squeezes between your toes. You remind yourself you're barefooted by choice. Shoes are expensive, and why wear leather when your feet are already thickened by calluses? You pull your tunic back on and brush your fingers through your hair, sending another wave of crawling insects scattering into the gloom. You force your lips into a half-smile, the only gesture you feel allowed this early in the day. Laughter here is a brief rebellion, dark, unexpected, and quick to vanish. Turning toward the road, you notice the well, a mossy stone ring, its bucket half filled with green-tinged water. At least it isn't stagnant. You lower the rope, cringe, as the bucket scratches the side, and haul it up. The surface ripples, reflecting clouds you pray might bring rain. You cup your hands and sip. The water is cold, and grit scratches your tongue. Yet it is water, and it is life. Behind you, the door creaks as someone else stirs. You catch a glimpse of your neighbor, an old woman whose knuckles are swollen from weaving baskets. She holds a rag dipped in vinegar, attempting to scrub her face. Her eyes meet yours. No words pass. You both know the ritual. Vinegar for scent, not for true cleaning. You nod, and she offers a cracked grin before her hands resume their futile work. The sun climbs higher, spilling pale light over the village. You notice tufts of straw clinging to the thatch roof, blowing like dandelion seeds. A child blunders past, trailing a threadbare blanket, tugging at your sleeve to point at a goose. Your stomach twists at the sight of that goose. Today's is dinner, if you're lucky, yet you feel a pang of sorrow for that bird, already baptized in the same muck that drenches your life. You move on to the communal latrine, a wooden bench, with holes carved too close together. The stench inside is a wall that forces tears. You hold your breath, squat, and try to finish quickly, smiling grimly at those who sit beside you in shared embarrassment. You hope they won't judge the smell of your clumsy fumbling, but you worry they already have. Back on your feet, you rub your hands together, trying to clear the worst of the waste, though you know the dirt will linger beneath your nails until dusk. You dab at your mouth with the rag from your pocket, wiping crumbs from the night before. You bring the rag to your face again, hoping to clean your eyes of sleep, but only smear ash around your nose. Passing by the baker's oven, you inhale the promise of fresh bread. The oven's heat pushes warmth into your bones for the first time that morning. You catch the baker's eye. He points to a lump of dough that didn't rise. He tosses it to you. It lands with a thud, heavy and wet. You take it gratefully. Tonight, you will tear off the edges and dunk them in broth as you walk toward the fields. The wind picks up. A cloud of dust and chaff whips across your path, clinging to the sweat on your skin. You blink until the world comes back into focus, row upon row of crops, wilted under a sun that never seems kind. You remember the day you last cleaned yourself by crawling beneath the low branches of an ash tree, scattering ashes in your hair. For a moment, you felt almost pure, but the memory tastes like ash now, too. You push on, shoulders squared against the wind. In the distance, you see the manor house perched above the village, its walls bleached by sun and breeze, its windows bright with curtains you can only imagine. You envy those curtains their cotton warmth. You envy the lords and ladies their perfumed baths. But envy is a luxury you cannot afford. Instead, you swallow grit and silence, and you bend to the soil, because despite the filth, despite the pain, there are seeds to plant and life to coax from the earth yet again. You step off the beaten path and into the heart of the village, where filth is not just tolerated but woven into every ritual. The sun has climbed higher, yet the air feels thick and unmoving, as if the stench itself has weight. You duck under a low-hanging beam to pass through a narrow alley, and immediately your nostrils fill with the sharp tang of fermenting cabbage and the sour undertones of day-old ale. A woman stoops by a wooden trough, rinsing rags in murky water that ripples with the shapes of unseen things. You pause, uncertain whether you'd rather see them or leave the mystery intact. Continuing on, you find the communal washing area, a shallow stone basin fed by a thin trickle from the well. Here, cloth and bodies share the same basin. You drop your soiled tunic into the water first, swishing it back and forth against the basin's lip. Ash and clay swirl in the basin like storm clouds, turning the water gray. You scrub vigorously, using handfuls of coarse straw as makeshift brushes, trying to dislodge the grime buried in the wool's fibers. Your knuckles smart as the straw catches on ragged cuticles, but still you press on, because a moment of clean is worth the pain. Once the tunic is suspended in murk, you bend and thrust your hands into the basin. The water is cold enough to draw a gasp from your lungs, and those around you start. You clamp your eyes shut against a sudden sting, lice bobbing on the surface like unwanted guests at a feast. You fish them out one by one, squashing each against the stone rim before dropping the corpse back into the gray soup. A child watches you with wide eyes, trembling. You remember being their age and finding the same creatures in your hair, and you feel a fleeting bond, broken as you realize the child's own mother is scrubbing at her skirts nearby, utterly oblivious. Your hands wring the tunic until droplets rain down on the dirt below. You retrieve the garment and press it to your chest, savoring the feeling of damp fibers closing around you. It feels almost tender, like a lover's embrace. You slip it on, shivering as the cold water seeps into your skin, then shrug and blot your chest with a scrap of burlap you keep for this purpose. It's better than nothing that a passing swineherd trudges through, her pigs snuffling at her heels. She carries a bucket of slops from last night's supper, gristle, bone fragments, spoiled porridge, and dumps it at the edge of the basin. The water becomes fouler, dark chunks bobbing. The swineherd grins, revealing blackened teeth, and warns you with a crooked finger, "Scrub, but don't drink." You nod with mock seriousness, but inside you wonder if this bucket of refuse once fueled someone's hope for tomorrow. You press on toward the kitchen gardens, where herbs and vegetables struggle against the trampling feet of livestock. Here, you pause to rub your arms. The prickly hairs attract dust like magnets, and you inhale the scent of lavender and rosemary wafting from an overgrown patch. It's the closest thing to perfume you'll smell today. You tuck a sprig of thyme behind your ear, pretending it might disguise the odor of your body, though you know it's futile. By midday, the sun has baked the ground dry, turning mud into flaky clay that cracks beneath your boots. You reach the blacksmith's forge, where sparks fly like tiny stars, and the heat is almost welcome after the chill of dawn. The blacksmith wipes soot from his forehead with the back of his sleeve and offers you a piece of stale bread. You try not to flinch at the grimy cloth, but you accept the bread nonetheless. You bite into it, crumbs scattering across your chest, and realize it's better fuel than nothing. A guard marches past, armor clanking, intent on his supervision of the Lord's fields. He's polished from head to toe, his helm gleaming in the sun. You meet his gaze, and for a moment, you imagine a world where you could buy a bath, or even a jug of clean water. Then he's gone, and the dream flees as quickly as it came. You press on to the riverbank, where laundry is piled in heaps, shirts, aprons, cloaks all soiled with the day's toils. Each villager scrubs at their garments, competing for elbow room and fresh water. You kneel at the edge, ankle deep in mud, and cup a handful of river water. It's clearer than well water, but cold enough to make your skin prickle. You grip the hem of your tunic and dip it, dragging it back and forth across a smooth rock. Fibers release clouds of dirt, and the river claims them. You imagine the current carrying that filth far downstream, away from this place. The little of it ever leaves. When a fellow washerwoman complains of the chill, you wrap your arms around yourself. You wonder how people bathed here in winter, when ice floes cracked along the shallows. You think of the stories of ritual cleansings in frost, how ice broke pain into pieces small enough to bear. You shiver, not certain whether to pity them or to envy their devotion. Leaving the river, you clench your damp clothes against your body and trudge back toward the village center. You pass the priest's house, where the air smells of incense and burned herbs. You hesitate, desperate for fragrance, but fear the scorn of the church if you linger too close. Priests bathe only on holy days, and even then with caution. Water is a path to temptation, they say. You lower your head and step on by late afternoon. You're back at the trough, rinsing off sweat and ash one final time. You scrub until your palms bleed, until the water turns pink at the edges. You see someone else watching, an elderly man whose once keen eyes now glaze with age. He offers you a small smile, a private acknowledgement of your shared struggle. You nod and continue scrubbing, your arms heavy with exhaustion, as the sun dips low. You hang your tunic over a fence post to dry as best it can. Under the glow of a fading sky, you feel a momentary satisfaction. The clothes are cleaner than they were at dawn, and your skin, though still lined with grime, feels less like a prison. You tuck the rag and the handful of herbs into your belt, preparing to return to your hovel, where the final chore awaits, emptying the chamber pot before nightfall. In this village, cleanliness is not a right, but a fleeting victory. Tonight, as you crawl into your straw-stuffed bed, you'll savor that victory for as long as you can, until the weight of filth returns with the morning light. You follow the narrow lane past the butcher's stall and toward the edge of town, where the bathhouse stands behind a low fence of splintered wood. Its walls are half-timbered and sagging, the roof tiled with mossy slate that drips when the wind pushes rain sideways. A sign painted by some long-forgotten hand swings on a rusted hinge. Bathers welcome, for a price. You hesitate at the threshold, bracing yourself for what awaits inside. Pushing the door open, you step into darkness lit by a single iron lantern. The air is thick with steam and whispered rumors. You hear laughter, a hushed, guilty cackle, then the splash of water. You wipe your palm across the worn beam and summon courage to enter. Inside, the bathhouse is a maze of chambers. In one room, a woman sits on a rotted bench, coaxing lice from her hair with a splinter of wood. In another, two disgraced noblemen huddle behind curtains, arguing about a wager lost over too much wine. You catch only fragments. His wife will never know. A man deserves his private pleasures. Their voices echo against damp stone. You step into the main hall, where a shallow pool of lukewarm water fills three sides of the room. The far wall is mirrored glass, cracked, but still reflecting dim shapes. Steam rises in lazy coils, and ripples across the water catch the lantern light like 1,000 trembling eyes. You realize each ripple is someone's fear of exposure, not of naked flesh, but of scandal. You disrobe behind a rough-hewn screen and slip into the water. At first, the embrace is soothing. The heat seeps into your bones, loosening the tension of toil and hunger. You float, eyes closed, as the scent of lavender oil drifts from clay lamps on a ledge above. For a fleeting moment, you forget mud, lice, and hunger. You taste luxury. Then you feel it, a glance at your back. You open your eyes to see an old crone, once a midwife, they say, watching you from the shallows. Her face is lined like parchment, and her eyes glint with something unreadable. She holds a bowl of soapy ashes in one hand and dips a rag into it, producing faint suds. Cleanliness, she rasps, is for the dead. The living have sins to wash away. She dips the rag into your hair, scrubs at your scalp. You flinch, but the water masks the sting. She mutters prayers or curses, you cannot tell which, and works the ash into your hair, chanting softly. You stand, teeth gritted, until your hair feels as stripped as tree bark in winter. Clothes off, you move deeper into the pool, but the water grows colder here. Someone's body presses against your shoulder. You freeze. A young man's laughter bubbles up as he slips past you to whisper to a woman on the far side. I've heard where they hide the fishwife's chamber pot. They giggle like school children, scandal fresh on their tongues. You turn away, ashamed. This place is meant for cleansing, but instead it bathes in secrets. You begin to scrub your arms with a crust of lye soap, heart pounding. The soap bites, but you welcome the sting. Better pain than embarrassment that a chambermaid emerges, her face impassive. She carries a bucket of hot water and pours it over your back. Steam hisses as it lands, and you gasp. She says nothing, but when she leaves, she drops a handful of sprigs, mint, rosemary, into the basin. The herb oils swirl like ghosts across the water's surface. You inhale deeply, as if scent alone could wash away your memory of the cramped alleyways and the pig wallows. You finish your bath in silence, broken only by the sound of water sluicing toward the drain. You rinse the last of the ash from your hair and step toward the exit, wrapping a thin linen cloth around yourself. As you dress, you realize your body feels strange, lighter, almost unrecognizable. Yet your mind buzzes with shame, the knowledge that while you were washing away dirt, you were also submerging yourself in gossip and impropriety as you leave the bathhouse. The crone's words echo. The living have sins to wash away. You wonder which of your own sins clings to your skin more stubbornly than any dirt. Envy of the noblemen, laughter at their expense, the fleeting luxury you felt while bathing. You step back into the lane, clutching your linen about you like a fragile shield. Outside, the world is still filthy, but it seems sharper now, more urgent. You know you will return to labor in mud, eat stale bread, and sleep on straw. Yet you carry within you a memory of warmth and steam, of splashing water, and drifting lavender. You tuck that memory into your chest like a secret token, a reminder that even in the darkest filth, there is a taste of something purer, if only for a moment. You trudge past the smoke-blackened forge and into the shadow of the manor's outer wall, where privilege and poverty stand side by side, separated only by a gilded hinge. Here, you see how cleanliness itself is a currency, coin you do not possess, minted by rank and spent on appearances rather than true sanitation. A nobleman leans from an arched window, his sleeves silk-lined and immaculately white. He dabs at his lips with a handkerchief threaded through gold embroidery. You catch a faint swirl of rose water, an aroma meant to mask blood, sweat, and fear. Below, you stand knee-deep in mud, your boots caked with it, wondering if he even knows what mud feels like. You move closer to the stables and watch the grooms wash the thoroughbreds with sponges of sea salt and scented oils. Each horse shines like polished bronze. Each mane glints under sunlit strands of saffron and amber. The grooms press mint into the nostrils of the beasts to calm them. The beasts breathe out grateful snorts. You remember the last time you leaned close to a horse, inhaled deep, and tasted only hay and the wild tang of dung. Further along, a noblewoman draped in velvet descends the stone steps. Her maidens usher her into a courtyard bath, a marble basin fed by lead pipes from the spring. Curtains part for her as she steps in, chin-high, water that glows like liquid pearl. You press your cheek to a cold stone and listen as her attendants pour bowls of warm water, then pour bowls of cooler water, orchestrating a dance of steam and chill designed to impart a gentle flush to her cheeks. She tilts her head back, eyes closed in bliss, unaware that down the lane, children are muddied from head to foot. You press on to the market square, where the baker, whose tunic you once envied for its cleanliness, leans over his counter. He wipes his hands on a stained cloth, then reaches into a basket of fine apples, rubbing one until its skin gleams. You draw near, tempted by the fruit, but you watch his hands instead, calloused, streaked with sweat, nicked at the knuckles. He glances up, smiles, and hands you an apple. You take it, feeling the cool flesh against your palm, but you hesitate to bite. He shakes his head. Eat, or you'll grow thin. You chew slowly, tasting crisp juice that feels foreign on your tongue. A group of clergy arrives, their robes swept clean of dust by unseen servants. They step into a side chapel, dip fingers into a silver basin of holy water, and cross themselves. In solemn ritual, you witness them bless the rain, an act of faith meant to cleanse the land. While just outside, the gutters overflow with dirt and refuse. You wonder if holy water tastes any different from the well water you drank at dawn. In a dim courtyard, you find the blacksmith again, polishing a sword for the Lord. His apron is scorched at the edges. His face is smeared with carbon black streaks. Yet he offers you a dip of water from his personal bucket, cleaner than yours. Save for essential tasks. You rinse your hands quickly, savoring the contrast. Here, a world away from chamber pots and muddy troughs. He watches you, expression unreadable, as though deciding whether you deserve that moment of purity. You press further to where the scribe sits in a makeshift open-air office. Parchment spread before him, quill in hand, he pauses to rinse ink from his fingers in a small silver dish. The water shimmers with floating flecks of gold leaf. He returns to his script, each letter precise, untainted. You recall the last time you tried to write something, your fingers black with soot, your thoughts muddled by the grime in your mind. Night falls, and lanterns flicker along the manor's parapets. From the ramparts, the Lord's trumpet calls the household to supper. You remain outside the gate, lingering at the edge of a lantern's glow. There, a serving girl emerges, carrying a pitcher of cider. She pauses to take a sip, blows across the rim, and blows again, testing for warmth or chill. She savors the taste, then returns to the kitchen, leaving droplets trailing down the cold stone. You press your palm to the gate's iron rings, cool, unyielding, and think of the hierarchy that determines who bathes how often, who touches water reserved for pleasure, and who drowns in mud simply to survive. You feel both anger and awe, anger at the injustice, awe at the power of simple water. To mark one's worth, turning away, you step back into the village. Torches set up by families light narrow yards. You pause at your own hovel door and look at the sliver of sky above. Stars burn pale but constant. You know the water you carry in your bucket will be rationed carefully, enough to quench thirst, and cook porridge, but not to cleanse your flesh. Still, you lift the bucket, aware of its weight. Equal parts hope and resignation. You pour the last drops over your hands, rub them together until your breath hitches at the sting. You press your nails clean of loam, but you know the dirt beneath them is only pushed aside, not banished. You catch your reflection in a shard of broken pottery, your face framed by lantern glow, eyes hollow but determined. In this world of hierarchies, water is power, and filth is the commoner's inheritance. Tonight, you'll sleep with that inheritance, pressed against your skin. But tomorrow, you'll rise again, kneel at the trough, dip your rag, and scrub at the stains that mark you as less than. And in that simple act, you'll crucify hierarchy one stroke at a time, until dawn comes. You press your shoulder against the cold wall of the bakehouse, catching your breath as a sudden cough rattles your chest. The baker glances up from his dough, concern flickering behind soot-smudged eyes. He nods toward a corner where a blanket hangs as a makeshift curtain. Inside it, a child lies twisting in fevered dreams, sweat patching the fabric like old stains. You feel a knot in your gut, knowing this cough is more than a chill. It's a herald of something darker. You step past the curtain and kneel beside the child. Pinched with sweat, she coughs again, a harsh rasp that echoes in the small room. You touch her forehead. It burns like glowing embers under a frosty sky. You press a rag dipped in vinegar to her lips. She drinks in shallow sips. Each gulp seems an effort, as if her body rebels against the water itself. Leaving the bakehouse, you step back into the street and inhale deeply. The air tastes of ash and bread, but beneath it lies the unmistakable odor of disease, rotting flesh, stagnant water, the acrid bite of urine soaked into cobblestones. Rats scurry at your feet, whisking through shadows like living curses. You scuff your boot to send one fleeing, but it pauses and stares at you with beady red eyes before disappearing into a sewer grate. You think of the fleas. They live in your bedding, in your tunic, in the very walls of your hovel. You flinch as one hops across your wrist. You catch it between thumb and forefinger and squash it with a single squeeze. The corpse feels like a grain of sand, but you know each tiny body can carry plague, typhus, or worse. You pocket the dead insect as proof of the world's cruelty. Ahead, you see the apothecary's sign, a painted skull surrounded by sprigs of rue and wormwood. Inside, shelves sag under jars of strange powders and poultices. You enter, and the musty scent of dried herbs and vinegar wraps around you. The apothecary, a stooped man with hollow cheeks, slides a jar toward you. Rue, for cleansing the blood, he whispers. You count your coins. You can only afford one apothecary cure today. You choose rue because it burns less than mercury, and you swallow a pinch, grimacing as the bitter green dust scratches your throat. Onward, you pass the communal latrine again, but today it's cordoned off by planks nailed haphazardly. A crude sign depicts a skeleton skull with the words "quarantine" scrawled beneath. You peer through a gap and see bodies laying out on boards, faces pale and lips tinged blue. A jailer with a torch stands guard, his eyes distant. You wonder if anyone out there remembers bathing or if the memory has been claimed by the dead. A sudden drumbeat echoes through the streets, a gong beaten by the town crier. You join a small crowd gathered in the square. He raises a hand and declares in a booming voice that the Lord has ordered a mass cleaning of the markets, though no one believes it will happen. The crowd murmurs, some scoff, others fall silent, fear fluttering through them like caged birds. You press your palm to your heart as if to still that flutter. You skirt the edge of the square and slip into an alley to hide your tears. You lean against the rough stones, your breath coming in ragged gasps. You imagine escaping to the fields beyond the river, but you know the rats and fleas travel there too. Decay follows you. Invisible yet unmistakable as dusk settles, you return to your hovel, each step heavier than the last. Inside, your blanket, laden with yesterday's pests, beckons you like a siren. You strip off your tunic and clothe yourself in the blanket, hoping the fabric will shield you from the night chill more than it shelters pests. You lie on the straw beneath, back against the wall where cracks let in a draft that feels like the breath of death itself. Before sleep drags you under, you press your ear to the floor. You think you hear scratching, tiny feet, or bones in the ground shifting. You cannot tell. You sigh, remembering the apothecary's rue and the baker's dollop of bread broth. You know neither can fully salve the open wounds of disease. You close your eyes and try to summon a dream of clean water, a bathhouse free of whispers, a world without rats. Instead, you taste iron and ash. You feel a weight on your chest, not your own. The weight of centuries of sickness pressed into your lungs. And as sleep finally finds you, you wonder if you'll wake in fever or in health. You slip away from the village bustle before anyone notices, seeking the one sanctuary you believe still belongs to you, the old ash tree behind the barn. Here, in a shallow hollow between its gnarled roots, you bend and yank at the hem of your tunic, red clay staining your palms. No one else knows this hiding spot. No neighbors, no children chasing pigs, no gossiping maidens. Here, you are alone. With your body's betrayals, you drop to one knee and begin, hurriedly, to unlace your boots. Each leather thong squeaks against your damp skin, the sound startling in the hush. You press your palms against the earth, feeling its roughness, tiny pebbles, shards of broken pottery, the grit that has followed you all day. You sense the eyes of unseen animals, a fox perhaps, or the ever-watchful crow perched high above. You swallow hard, aware that even they could judge you for what you're about to do. Boots off, you tug the tunic over your head in one quick motion and knot the corners together, fashioning a makeshift basket. Inside, the tunic is heavy and soaked, the evidence of your labor and neglect. You set it aside, wincing as the raw wool brush needle pricks on your shoulders. You reach for the small pouch at your belt. Ash mixed with water, a crude scrub you scavenged from the hearth's embers. It's cold and gritty, but it is all you have. You dip your fingers into the ash water, then rub at your arms. The mixture scratches and abrades, lifting layers of grime, but also drawing stinging tears from your eyes. You whisper a prayer or a curse, you cannot tell which, as you work from your forearms to your elbows, from your shoulders to the base of your neck. Tiny specks of dark soot cling in every crevice, and you flinch each time you dislodge one. As you scrub, memories press against your mind. The day you first noticed the stench in your hair when a traveling minstrel recoiled. The dinner where you dipped your hands in communal broth and felt the other villagers' eyes flick toward your greasy sleeves. The night the Lord's daughter snubbed you at the well, turning her nose as though you carried leprosy rather than dirt. Each memory is a weight you carry deeper into your flesh. The ash water gone gritty. You lean back against the tree, closing your eyes. You taste ash on your lips and feel the bark press into your spine. Your lungs burn with cold air, and for a moment, you imagine a warm bathhouse instead, a place where you could soak until every demon beneath your skin floated away. You imagine endless rows of hot water, steam curling like prayer, and attendants who offer scented oils rather than scratching your flesh with crude ash. You hold on to that impossible fantasy for a heartbeat, then exhale sharply, letting it vanish with the wind. You step forward, retrieving your tunic and tugging it on over damp skin. The fabric clings to every ridge of soap-scrubbed flesh, reminding you that the act of cleaning is no more than a fleeting betrayal of the dirt beneath. You slip your boots back on, wincing as each thong bites into tender skin. Your feet are red, rubbed raw by mud and ash. You press your palms to your cheeks, skin still damp, slightly cooled, and sigh, tasting ash again. Rising to your feet, you cast one last glance at the tree's roots, as though bidding farewell to a friend who offered brief solace. Behind you, the barn door creaks, a reminder that there is work yet to be done. Muck to shovel, animals to feed, dinner to fetch. The ash-scrubbed skin will soon be saturated with sweat. The tunic will soak with mud again. But for now, you carry a sliver of pride. You reminded yourself that you deserved a moment of cleanliness. A stolen victory over the filth that claims you by birth. As you step back into the path, you meet your own gaze in a puddle's reflection. Your eyes, once dull with fatigue, hold something sharper. Defiance, perhaps, or the fragile glow of hope. You bend to scoop water onto your face, washing away the final layer of ash. The ripple distorts your reflection, like a memory you cannot fully trust. You straighten, brush a loose strand of hair from your forehead, and offer yourself a crooked smile that in this village, shame is constant, a companion as familiar as lice or hunger. But in this stolen moment, you achieved reprieve. You press onward, toward the barn, shoulders squared against the judgment of both neighbors and self. You will carry this small triumph beneath your tunic, pressed close to your heart, until the next chance to reclaim even a fraction of your dignity. You pause. At the crossroads where three alleyways converge, each slick with yesterday's muck and this morning's dew. A thin shaft of sunlight glints off wet cobblestones, illuminating your muddied feet as you step forward. From the corner of your eye, you glimpse a boy crouched by a pile of straw, holding something aloft like a trophy. You round the corner, and see it's a dead rat, matted with grime, tail curled like a question mark in the dirt. He waves it at you, beaming, as if it were the finest offering to a king. You laugh, a sharp, unexpected bark that stalls in your throat. The boy's grin widens, and he tosses the rat into a puddle. You watch it flop like a rag doll in half-frozen water. You crouch beside him, elbow brushing straw, and pick up a twig. Together, you jab at the rat's belly, sending muddy ripples across the puddle. Each poke unleashes a small cloud of bubbles. The boy snorts, and you snort back. Two filth-covered allies in a world that insists cleanliness is virtue. A woman's voice calls out from the shadows. Stop that, you fools. You straighten, twigs snapping in your hand, as an elderly laundress emerges, her skirts stained from years of basin work. She crosses herself, muttering about disrespect, but the boy dashes off into the maze of alleys, leaving you alone with the rat. You stand, eyes fixed on the gray corpse, and then suddenly, without warning, you laugh again, full and free. The rat is grotesque, revolting, yet in that moment you feel alive. You pocket the twig and continue on, meeting a group of young women beside the communal well. One balances a wooden bucket on her head, another brushes lice from her friend's hair, giggling as each tiny insect dangles. They catch your gaze and beckon. You stoop by the well's edge and scoop water into your hands. As you lift it, a girl shakes her head and splashes you, cold water drenching your sleeves. You shriek, then laugh at the shock of it. She laughs too, and the echo of her mirth skitters across the courtyard like light on water. Nearby, a piglet squeals as it chases a chicken across the yard. You drop the water and chase after them, arms outstretched. The chicken flaps, squawking, and the piglet grunts, snorting with delight. You corner them against a fence, then step back, panting, your sides aching from laughter. A neighbor emerges. To shoo them away, hands on hips. But even she can't resist a smile when she sees you covered head to toe in splashes of dirt and water. The sun climbs higher, and the laughter trails off into chuckles. You wipe tears from your eyes and glance at your reflection in a puddle. Your cheeks are flushed, your hair is plastered to your skull, your tunic is streaked with mud and water. For a moment, you catch a glimpse of the person you might have been in a cleaner world, a person free enough to laugh without shame. You tilt your head and bob as if dancing, making faces at your own reflection. You imagine you could hold that moment forever, but the puddle ripples and shatters the illusion. Continuing your path, you pass the baker's apprentice, who is rolling out dough on a rough plank table. A lump of flour lumps in one corner. A stray clump of dough clings to his fingers. He looks up, sees your face, and flicks a handful of flour at you. You retaliate with a wet clump of mud. The two of you exchange projectiles until the table looks like a battlefield. Then you step back, surveying the chaos with a satisfied grin. The apprentice tosses you a half-formed roll. You catch it, nod in thanks, then toss it at his chest, soft and doughy. He catches it and takes a bite, shrugging his flour dust puffs. Around him, laughter hangs in the air like birdsong, unexpected in a world built on struggle. You feel a lightness in your chest, as though the shackles of shame loosen their grip. You realize these moments of dark humor, of poking dead rats, of splashing kids and flinging dough, are small revolts against a life defined by filth. Here, in the laughter, you claim a sliver of joy that no stench can steal as afternoon wanes. You head for the tavern at the edge of town. Inside, the hearth fire roars in a blackened grate, casting flickering shadows on stone walls. Patrons lean over tables, drinking weak ale and telling jokes you only half hear. You squeeze through a gap and settle on a stool at the counter. The tavern keeper, an ex-monk with a nose like a turned hoof, slides a wooden cup toward you. You lift it, meet his eye, and offer a silent toast to the absurdity of everything. He nods, as though he's known that toast for years. You take a sip, bitter, sour, but no worse than water laced with ash. You swallow, set the cup down, and let the laughter settle into a quiet warmth. You glance toward the door, expecting more chaos. Another boy with a rat, another flower war. But the door remains still, and you feel a pang of nostalgia for what has just passed. Rising, you leave the tavern and step into the golden haze of late afternoon. You think of the boy's grin, the women's giggles, the apprentice's shrug. You realize that, in this world of filth, laughter is more precious than clean water. It's a rebellion, a reminder that even when the body is chained by dirt, the spirit can still soar. Ahead, the manor's silhouette looms against a red sky. Beyond it lies Part 2, stories of crowns and chronicles where filth is a footnote. But for now, you stand in the fading light, muddy and unashamed, carrying laughter in your veins. Because no matter how deep the mire, the human heart finds its way to joy, if only for a moment. Not everyone lived in dirt and silence. Beyond these mud-clogged streets and the stench of sweat lay halls of polished stone where the world's fate was inked in royal decrees rather than etched in grime. While you bent to scoop water from fetid troughs, others sat on thrones of marble, tapping quills across parchment to forge empires. Their banquets brimmed with wine and spiced meats, their bathhouses steamed with scented waters. They wrote laws, waged wars, married for alliances, and shaped the very fabric of history. Yet even they could not scrub away the burdens of power, the shadows of betrayal, or the weight of expectation. Imagine a queen whose perfumed corridors masked whispered rumors of rebellion. Picture a king whose jeweled bath couldn't cleanse the stains of civil war. In Part 2, you will leave the peasant's world of mud and lice behind and step into the grand tapestry of medieval courts. Here, A figure emerges whose life straddled opulence and oppression, mercy and might. Through her story, woven with triumphs, betrayals, and ironclad resolve, you will glimpse how even the highest-born could never fully escape humanity's darker truths. And so, as the village falls into twilight, prepare to ascend to those lofty halls. The ground may change beneath your feet, but the shadows remain. Eleanor of Aquitaine was born in 1122, in a world that measured worth by lineage and land, yet judged a woman's value by the faintest whisper of her fragrance. As a child of 7, she danced barefoot through rose gardens at Poitiers, her laughter trailing petals like a parade. Silk gowns brushed her ankles. Tutors coaxed Latin and logic from her curious mind. She learned to read by candlelight, ink staining her fingers long before she understood the power it would give her to be 15. She was Queen of France, crowned before a choir of bishops whose robes gleamed like stars. Her gowns weighed more than a peasant's body. Her headdress towered with pointed elegance, a crown of woven gold. Yet despite the finery, Eleanor's coronation was fraught with unease. The spectators saw a girl, not an empress. They smelled her perfume, not her resolve. Behind palace walls, she discovered that perfume was both gift and guard. Rose water and violet essences masked the scent of sweat from lesson after lesson at the scriptorium. When she bowed an audience, courtiers sniffed the air, deciding if her lineage, Poitiers heiress, was worth alliance. Eleanor learned early that scent could seal treaties and spark rumors. Her marriage to Louis VII was meant to cement power, but the union soon revealed its fractures. Louis was pious. Eleanor was passionate. He spoke of fasting and faith. She spoke of strategy and sovereignty. Their bedchamber became a battleground of ideals. His prayers at dawn, her petitions for counsel at dusk. Gossip spread that Eleanor bathed too often, a claim meant to tarnish her reputation. Behind closed doors, she insisted it was for health, not vanity. Court life offered further lessons in hierarchy. She watched the king retreat to his private baths, copper tubs filled with rose petals and wine, while she stood at the edge, draped in velvet, permitted only to watch. Servants whispered that she demanded her own tubs, but none appeared. She drank from goblets reserved for the king, yet she could not taste the security he enjoyed. At T20, she set sail for the Second Crusade alongside her husband, clad in chainmail that chafed beneath her silken shifts. The journey was a crucible. Sun-scorched days melted makeup. Dusty winds turned hair to straw. Nights by campfires stoked fever. Eleanor rode at the head of her own contingent, commanding knights as fiercely as any man. She negotiated safe passage through hostile lands, bartering horses, once symbols of her courtly elegance, for water and grain. Her leadership during the crusade won admiration, but the desert's heat and the stench of death tested her spirit. She witnessed camp latrines overflow, bodies buried hastily, the camel caravans leaving filth in their wake. In letters home, she compared the Crusade's trials to the cold intrigue of court. At least in battle, the enemy's face was clear. Returning to France, Eleanor found her marriage in tatters. Louis's faith hardened into fanaticism. Rumors hardened into accusations. When she rode beside him into Damascus, she wore dust like armor. When she rode home alone, she wore defiance. In 1152, she sought, and won, a divorce. It was scandalous, a queen abandoning her king. She left behind her silk and chapel candles, stepping into a freedom as perilous as it was rare. Divorced but undiminished, Eleanor retained Aquitaine's vast lands and armies. She remarried Henry Plantagenet, Count of Anjou, who soon became King Henry II of England. As Queen of England, she learned the true cost of power. Her new court boasted greater wealth, marble halls, gold embroidery, clipped hedges scented with jasmine. Yet the whispers followed her. She was overambitious, a woman meddling in masculine affairs, too eager to challenge the crown she wore. She birthed 8 children in 12 years, future kings and queens whom she guided with the same tenacity. She wielded on battlefields. She hosted councils in her great halls, rolling out parchment scrolls like red carpets for debate. She fostered troubadours and poets, believing culture could civilize as effectively as conquest. Yet behind the tapestries, the stench of betrayal began to gather. Nobles who promised loyalty by day plotted coups by night. Through silk and sweat, through baths perfumed and campaigns waged, Eleanor learned that cleanliness of reputation was as elusive as that of the body. Oils could mask dirt, words could obscure intent, but power, once stained by rumor or rebellion, was hard to reclaim. As queen, she wore both crown and curse, celebrated for her wit and exiled for her defiance. Her life in this section of history reads like a testament to contradiction, luxury and labor, devotion and dissent. She bathed in rosewater, yet commanded nights through the desert. She dictated courtly etiquette, yet flouted its most sacred rules. In her ascent from duchess to twice-crowned queen, she navigated both the fragility of silk and the grit of battlefield dust, learning that true power was neither in purity nor in perfumed halls, but in the resolve to endure, to adapt, and, when necessary, to rebel. Eleanor of Aquitaine stepped onto English soil in 1154 as queen consort of a realm far larger than her native duchy, lands that stretched from the Scottish borders to the Pyrenees. The English crown she donned was heavier than any crown she had known, studded with pearls and sapphires, yet pressing on her brow like the expectations of two peoples. In Poitiers, she had been heiress and duchess. Here, she was wife to Henry II, King of England and lord of vast continental estates. Henry was a man of iron ambition, tall, severe, with eyes that studied everyone as if they were chess pieces. His court at Winchester glittered with gold brocade and polished marble, with tapestries depicting hunts and heroic sagas. Eleanor arrived in a carriage lined with crimson velvet, scented with lavender and clove. Courtiers bowed so low their foreheads scraped stone, yet in their eyes lurked the question, would this French duchess usurp English custom? She answered with poise. At the coronation in Westminster Abbey, Eleanor rode behind Henry on horseback, her crimson mantle trailing like a banner of power. Priests anointed her with oil. The congregation sang psalms that seemed to echo in her blood. Yet whispers followed her through the aisle. She had asked for more lands, more titles, more privileges. They said she bathed too often, an affront to English austerity. To in the days that followed, she mastered the ritual of English governance. Council meetings at Winchester, charters read by candlelight, disputes settled under elm trees in courtyard glades. She spoke fluent Norman French and passable Anglo-Saxon. She learned the names of every abbey and every abbess in the realm. She negotiated with barons, reminding them that their loyalty to her was loyalty to Henry. She restored stolen lands to widows and orphans, earning gratitude in the shires even as she provoked envy in the palace. Yet for all her skill, contradictions dogged her every step. In public, she presided over lavish feasts, swans roasted whole, peacocks served in their plumage, yet she insisted on strict rules for waste. No grain to be thrown to pigs, no skins to be discarded without tanning. She preached thrift even, as she adorned herself in silk dyed with imported cochineal red. Her marriage to Henry produced heirs, 8 children whose futures she mapped like constellations. Young Richard, fierce and curious, absorbed her lessons in governance. John, restless and sullen, learned to resent his mother's ambition. Eleanor lavished attention on Matilda, her eldest daughter, teaching her embroidery and Latin so that Matilda might someday wield authority in her own right. But as she raised her children, she also watched them become pawns. Alliances forged and broken through betrothals, sisters married off to foreign courts, brothers sent to govern distant provinces. By 1170, cracks in the royal partnership grew wide. Henry's demands grew harsher. Taxes increased, forests claimed, justice meted out with severity. Eleanor watched as her beloved courts of Aquitaine were taxed to fund English wars, as her native lands raised swords in rebellion. She interceded, on behalf of her vassals, pleading with Henry to temper his decrees. He dismissed her counsel, calling her pampered duchess and French interloper. Her outrage flared. She confronted him in council, her voice echoing off stone, accusing him of betrayal. Courtiers scattered like birds at her fury. That fury became action. In 1173, Eleanor threw open the gates of Aquitaine and rallied her sons, Richard, Geoffrey, and young Henry into open revolt against their father. Knights swore fealty to her cause in chateaux and abbeys across southwestern Gaul. She led councils in Bordeaux, drafted battle plans, and financed armies with Aquitanian coffers. For a woman in the 12th century, this was treason incarnate. And yet, in her mind, it was justice. The rebellion burned fiercely for 2 years. Castles changed hands like toys in a child's game. Rivers ran red with blood. Fields lay fallow as peasants fled the smoke. Eleanor's dignity and courage earned her the loyalty of many, but also the hatred of Henry's allies. In 1174, Henry marched south with a retinue of knights and mercenaries. He besieged Poitiers, the ducal seat, with siege engines that groaned. With each launch, Eleanor, refusing to yield, donned armor and rode forth to inspect the walls. Chroniclers wrote that she stood like a lioness among men, her gaze fierce, her mantle dust-streaked. Yet even lionesses can be outmatched. When Poitiers fell, Eleanor was captured and sent to confinement, first in Salisbury, then in Rouen, then in Winchester. The queen who had once filled halls with her laughter now paced her cell in silence. The silk gowns were replaced by coarse wool. The perfumed baths gave way to a single basin scraped clean once a week. For 16 years, she languished under guard, her children growing up in her absence. But captivity did not dim her resolve. She watched as Henry's realm frayed, rebellions flared, alliances faltered, his health waned under the weight of guilt and regret. When Henry faced revolt from his own barons and a tenuous truce with France, he summoned Eleanor. In 1189, weakened by age and disease, he restored her freedom. She emerged from her cell aged in body but rejuvenated in spirit, her hair streaked gray, her eyes blazing with vindication. Eleanor returned to Aquitaine, her authority restored, her legend cemented. She presided over her son Richard's coronation in Rouen, now known as the Lionheart, for she had raised him in rebellion, in prison, and in triumph. Richard's reign was brief but glorious. He granted his mother double the lands she had lost. She ruled as regent during his crusade, issuing charters in her own name, adjudicating disputes, and hosting troubadours to celebrate her legacy. Through silk and sweat, through thrones and chains, Eleanor of Aquitaine claimed her power on 2 continents. She was obeisance and outrage, opulence and defiance, a queen who bathed in rosewater yet stormed castles and chainmail. In her life, she embodied the very contradictions of medieval hygiene, the illusion of purity wrapped around the grit of rebellion. In the grand halls of Eleanor's courts, cleanliness became both statement and spectacle, a contradiction wrapped in velvet and varnished wood. Though she reigned with iron resolve, Eleanor understood that the appearance of purity could shape perception as much as any decree. Yet beneath every polished surface lay a tangle of dirt, desire, and deceit. At Fontevraud Abbey, where she sought solace after Henry's death, Eleanor instituted strict washing rituals for the nuns. Each sister carried a pewter basin of water scented with rose petals, and linen cloths folded like prayer books. They scrubbed hands before vespers, lest their touch sully sacred vessels. Yet the abbey's walls, thick with centuries of incense, held stains unseen, soot in ceiling timbers, mold behind tapestries, the faint tang of unwashed bodies hidden by habits. In Bordeaux, Eleanor's seat as duchess, she hosted elaborate, hand-washing ceremonies before every feast. Servants paraded in with ewers of warm water and bowls of scented soap. Courtiers knelt, hands cupped, as attendants poured water over their palms, then offered towels embroidered with the duchy's lily emblem. It was theater and assertion, of civility in a world still steeped in filth. Yet the kitchens beyond the great hall stank of rotting fish and sour milk. Rats nested in the rafters, and the stew simmered over ashes swept from last night's hearth. Eleanor's own chambers reflected this duality. Her private bath chamber boasted lead pipes running from a spring, filling a marble tub high enough to submerge a grown knight. The walls gleamed with plaster tinted rose by crushed bloom petals, and silver basins sat upon carved oaken stands. A painted frieze depicted nymphs dancing around fountains. Yet the plumbing leaked in hidden corners, and servants scooped stagnant water from scullery drains to water curtain-bound basil and mint. The air, though perfumed, carried humidity that bred mildew beneath floorboards. The queen's laundry was a marvel of organization. Master laundresses scoured linen in ash and lye, stretched sheets on lines across sun-swept courtyards, and beat tapestries until dirt fled like prey. Yet the ash, if left damp, became a breeding ground for bacteria. The lye ate at fabric fibers, causing fine embroidery to fray. Eleanor would drape her most prized gowns on mannequins in the gallery, each fold immaculate, each thread gleaming. But beneath the hems, invisible to her eyes, lay the frayed remains of woolen cloaks worn by her children on muddy journeys. Traveling between castles, Eleanor kept a caravan of bath barrels, oak tubs bound in iron, filled and emptied nightly by a retinue of pages. As they crossed marshes and mountains, the water turned brackish, clouded by straw, and thick with sediment that no amount of boiling could clear. At dawn, she would step into the barrels, water lapping at her calves, while servants tossed sprigs of rosemary to mask the earthiness. She emerged refreshed at first, but by midday, the wooden band swelled, the stench of rot rose to greet her, and the rosy veneer of courtly hygiene threatened to crack. Her children observed these rituals and learned their lessons. Richard wore gloves when eating fruit, lest rot from the skin mar his armor. John insisted on servants trimming his nails each morning, even as the fields beyond his window lay pat with cow dung. Matilda carried a small flask of orange blossom water to school, daintily dabbing her temples between Latin recitations. Yet each of them, out of sight, slipped into the moat to bathe in river water, drawn by the touch of free-flowing streams rather than perfumed cisterns. Clerics condemned such river dips as ungodly, calling water a path to temptation. They pointed to Genesis, where Eve's cleansing in Eden was metaphor, not instruction. The monk's rule at Citeaux mandated bathing only once a year, on Maundy Thursday, lest fleshly desires stir. Yet in winter, young novices slipped too. Hidden pools beneath frost-crusted oaks, their laughter echoing through the silent forest. Eleanor's courts sparked discourse across Europe. Chroniclers marveled at her obsession with cleanliness. Satirists mocked her vanity, painting her as a pampered princess afraid of her own shadow. Yet the same pens praised her patronage of medicine and scholarship. She commissioned texts on herbal remedies for plague, detailing the virtues of lavender, sage, and marjoram. She funded translations of medical treatises from Arabic, hoping knowledge could outpace decay. In councils of barons and bishops, Eleanor wore a simple veil and a ring of polished jet. She entered in humility, but left with decisions penned in her hand: laws regulating public latrines, ordinances against dumping refuse in rivers, and taxes earmarked for well maintenance. She argued that clean water was as crucial as coin. Yet when drought struck, those taxes were diverted to fund sieges or pay mercenaries, leaving wells to foul and roads to flood with filth. Thus, in Eleanor's world, cleanliness was never absolute, only aspirational. It was performance, policy, and paradox. The rich bathed, yet the poor shivered in squalor. Noble courts touted purity, yet disease lurked beneath silk. Laws sought order, yet mud reclaimed every street. Through her contradictions, Eleanor revealed a universal truth: that no matter the pomp of marble halls or the fragrance of rosewater, humanity's mess, moral, physical, and social, cannot be wholly washed away. Eleanor's twilight years were defined by both reflection and reinvention. After Richard the Lionheart's death in 1199, she served as regent for King John, her youngest son, wielding the same steely resolve that had ignited revolts decades before. She held court at Chinon, her decisions binding barons and bishops alike. Under her guidance, England's coffers swelled, taxes reformed, justice streamlined, and royal forests protected from poachers. Yet in every accolade lay whispers of overreach: a woman charging tolls and hearing petitions in the king's name. Her cultural patronage endured as legacy. Eleanor commissioned troubadours to compose chansons about women's strength, and she hosted poets whose verses wove praise of her deeds into medieval lore. She founded monasteries and abbeys: Fontevraud Abbey, where she chose to be buried beside Henry and Richard, became a pilgrimage site for those drawn by her legend. In these sacred cloisters, nuns chanted her name alongside saints, ensuring her story outlived her flesh, that Eleanor's influence extended to the legal realm. The Assizes of Clarendon bore her imprint, shaping English common law and laying groundwork for trial by jury. She advocated for widows' rights and dower protections, ensuring that noble women had recourse should their marriages fail. In an age when women's voices were seldom recorded, her legal reforms offered a rare testament to female agency. Her children carried her contradictions forward. Richard, brave and ruthless, echoed his mother's defiance in the siege engines. He commanded. John, cunning yet unstable, mirrored her political acumen and her flair for dramatic revolt. Matilda and Eleanor of Leicester embodied her literary passions, ruling their own domains and sponsoring translations of Anglo-Saxon chronicles. Every generation bore a fragment of her spirit, testing the limits of power and propriety, yet Eleanor's achievements were inseparable from the ironies of her life. She who had scoffed at the church's fear of water ensured that abbeys had the purest wells. She who had revolted against patriarchal rule shaped the very rules that governed succession. Her perfume-scented baths could not cleanse her from the stigma of rebellion, nor could her legislative triumphs absolve the bloodshed she once orchestrated. In her final decade, Eleanor retired to Fontevraud Abbey. She exchanged courtly gowns for a nun's habit, placing herself under the abbey's rule while continuing to advise monarchs through letters and envoys. On her deathbed in 1204, she reportedly murmured lines of verse she had composed, pairing lament for her husband with praise for her homeland. When she passed, candles burned through the night, and nobles traveled from all corners of Europe to pay homage. Her tomb, simple, unadorned, rests beneath a slab inscribed not with titles, but with a single declaration. Here lies Eleanor, once queen of two realms, now sister to Christ. The marble bears no roses or embroidered lilies, only the weight of a life that spanned kingdoms, crusades, rebellions, and reforms. In death as in life, she balanced luxury with asceticism, power with piety, perfume with grit. As you leave the grand tapestry of Eleanor's story, consider the duality of her legacy. The very woman who bathed in rosewater yet waged wars, who ruled courts yet embraced monastic asceticism, who shaped laws yet defied them. Her life underscores medieval hygiene's deeper truth, that purity is never simple, that rulers and peasants alike navigated the same murky waters of survival, dignity, and defilement. But while crowns and legacies shaped the world above ground, another realm lay waiting in silence, buried beneath abbeys, hidden in latrine pits, and echoing through the stones of forgotten chapels. Here lie the remnants of ordinary souls, bones etched by disease, pots stained with unspoken rituals, and mysteries whispered by soil and sediment. In Part 3, you will descend into that world, where archaeology uncovers the human stories that glossed over histories left behind. You will trace the whispers of the unwashed, the sick, and the unsung, as they speak through artifacts and earth, revealing the dark truths of medieval life that even queens could not command. Beneath the abbey's mosaic floors and manicured cloistered gardens lies a world undisturbed by prayer and privilege, a universe of silence pressed into earth. Archaeologists arrive at dawn, trowels glinting in the first light as they peel back turf and loam with reverent patience. You stand at the edge of their trench, feeling the cool dampness of the shadow it casts, as shovels crack through compacted layers of centuries. Their first find is nothing ornate, a fragment of broken pottery etched with drips of dark residue. It fits the curve of a chamber pot, ordinary, unremarkable, yet indispensable. They lift it with gloved hands, turning it over as if it might whisper its secrets. Under fingernails of soil, they glimpse crusts of bile and bone, evidence of meals hurried at dawn, emptied in secrecy beneath skirts of thought. Deeper they dig. A bowl of ash emerges, its rim chipped, its interior glazed by lime used for rudimentary cleansing. You imagine the hands that carried it, calloused, stained, shaping life with spit and sweat. The archaeologist brushes at the ash, revealing score marks where straw served as brush, flicking away centuries to expose human intention. At a layer below, a row of medieval tiles comes into view, diamond patterns in terracotta, shards of red and yellow. They once paved the floors of a grand hall. Now they cradle broken bones. The bones lie in tidy stacks, tibias aligned like pickets, skulls cradled beneath pelvic sockets. No chamber pot here, only the silent dead, buried in haste. The medics of the time deemed these souls contagious. They carved graves in a pit beyond. Consecrated ground, a quarantine woven into the earth itself. You lean closer, lowering your voice to a hush. Each layer of soil is a page in a book of lives. Beneath the bones, the earth is darker, almost inky with organic matter. The trench alights with the flick of lanterns as they reveal more shards, more bones, more traces of discarded lives. A shard bears a fingerprint pressed before firing, an intimate brand from fingers long since dust. They unearth a leather pouch nestled beside a child's femur. Inside, a handful of herbs, wormwood, rue, yarrow, still fragrant enough to prick your senses with bitterness and hope. These were offerings for healing, or perhaps wards against plague's ghost. The pouch's stitching, though brittle, holds fast, each stitch a testament to someone's quiet prayer. Rain begins to patter, the droplets collecting in the trench and darkening the soil's rich hues. The team covers their find with canvas, marking it for further study. You press your palm to the damp earth, imagining its wet warmth against skin at dawn, just as you tasted the well water in your village life simulation. Here, centuries later, hands still touch this ground in search of truth. They call you forward to peer through a viewfinder. You see a lattice of roots and bones and broken tile, a mosaic of mortality. In the lens, the dirt looks less like refuse and more like memory waiting for breath. You can almost hear whispers, fragments of breath mingled with prayer, barked orders, begging cries for relief from itching skin or burning fever day. Geophysicist steps forward, dropping small markers to record soil anomalies, dark patches where organic waste pooled, ghost latrines of medieval filth. These markers promise maps of defilement, channels that carried waste, pits that collected refuse, trenches that quarantined the sick. Each stain in the soil is a stanza in a poem of survival and neglect. You retreat from the trench as lanterns grow brighter in the fading light. The site becomes a cathedral of dirt, hushed voices cataloging remnants, each artifact a testament to lives led in defiance of decay. The archaeologists fold up their shovels, leaving only stakes and string to mark the hole. They will return, at dawn, to peel back more layers, to unearth further truths. You stand alone beside the clay-streaked canvas, touching a patch of exposed soil. It feels cool, alive, and you sense how close it is to the world above, how the closed eyes of the dead rest inches beneath your feet. You imagine the villagers' chamber pots, discarded pottery, ashes scraped into middens. You imagine your own hovel, the straw mattress caked with lice and sweat, now reduced to fragments of carbon and dust. The abbey bells toll in the distance, summoning the living to prayer. The dead lie silent. Beneath that prayer, you carry the weight of what you've seen, the pottery that held human waste, the bones that bear witness to disease, the herbs pressed against disease's dark promise. You walk away with the knowledge that beneath every cathedral, every throne, and every grand bath lie unsung stories waiting to be told, stories hidden in soil, stained by filth, preserved by silence. Beneath the stained floor tiles and beneath a thin layer of episcopal incense, the bones speak in silence. When archaeologists lift a femur, a rib, a skull crowned with cracks, each fragment offers a confession. You stand over an exposed skeleton, its jaw partially open as if mid-plea, and you sense the hush of centuries pressing down. That a tibia reveals a healed fracture, bone grown back crooked, leaving a limp that shadowed this person's every step. You imagine laboring at dawn, hobbling through muck, bone grinding in flesh with each footfall. A nearby vertebra bears erosion, signs of tuberculosis that would have stolen breath in fits of blood. You feel the ache in your own chest, the phantom rasp of failing lungs. The skulls are most haunting. Eye sockets hollow as wells, teeth chipped and stained with grit. None bear the polished shine of a noble's ivory. Molars show cavities so deep they pitted the jawbone, each decay a chronicle of sugarless diets punctuated by coarse bread and fermented ale. One skull tilts forward in perpetual nod, as though still listening to prayers it never answered. Beside a pelvic bone lies a bronze pin, an indicator that this individual once wore a cloak fastened at the shoulder, perhaps a mark of rank or a symbol of duty. Yet the grave was unmarked, buried beyond consecrated ground. You trace the curve of the pin and wonder if this person ever felt negligible in life, erased in death. Small bones, brittle as parchment, reveal intimate details, a child's radius, with lines of arrested growth, marking seasons of famine. A woman's wrist bone roughened by repetitive motion, spinning thread, pounding grain, endless chores that ground her strength into weakness. A man's metatarsal thinned from wearing ill-fitting shoes, or none at all, on roads rutted with refuse. Their stories lie in the very fabric of their skeletons. You crouch and peer at a vertebra stamped with eagle claw marks, evidence of a healing ritual. Monastic healers pressed the bird's talon into flesh to draw out infection, believing that eagle's spirit could carry disease away. You shiver, imagining the sting, the ritual prayer, the hope in that gesture. The bone bears a faint groove, colored by soil as dark as dried blood. Nearby, the soil yields more secrets, a scattering of blue ceramic beads, remnants of prayer rosaries. They lay mottled by dirt, washed with time, yet still threaded in the earth as if guarding the bones below. Perhaps this was a pilgrim, a penitent seeking absolution as they journeyed toward the abbey's gates, only to succumb before prayers could be answered that a cluster of small white eggs appears in a pit beside. The skeleton, a sign of intestinal parasites. Once alive in warmth and flesh, these creatures thrived in a world of unwashed water and cramped quarters. You hold one between thumb and forefinger, its shell translucent, like a memory trapped in amber. In that moment, you feel both revulsion and sorrow. These parasites left impressions on every villager's gut, shaping lives from within. A careful scan of the bones reveals osteological markers. Bony growths on wrists indicating heavy lifting. Joint erosion in shoulders from centuries of manual labor. Tiny pits on shin bones from repeated trauma. Each indicator maps a life lived in bone-deep toil. You imagine these people rising with sun, bending over fields or looms, their skeletons absorbing every stoop, every strain. You turn to the lead archaeologist, who points out a fractured skull healed during life, an injury so severe the victim must have endured dizzy spells, headaches, perhaps even lost memory. Yet they survived, living on with a misshapen cranium as testament to resilience. You sense a bittersweet triumph in that healed crack, proof of care, of community nursing a wounded member back to life. Even if hygiene remained elusive at your feet lies a clasped pair of hands fashioned in iron, a grave good meant to shield the deceased soul. The interlocked fingers suggest a final prayer or a binding agreement unfulfilled in life. A thin chain of copper wire still links the wrist bones, corroded but unbroken. You imagine the hands pressed together in plea or promise, now speaking. Across time, you stand and gently brush away loose soil. The voices of the dead rise in your mind. Whispers of thirst, groans of fever, sighs of childbirth, laughter crackling with defiance. They did not choose to lie here in a damp trench. Their lives were woven in the same ragged tapestry of filth and faith. Their bones are truth, unnatural yet honest. Rain begins to fall, seeping into the trench and pooling around the remains. You step back, letting the droplets wash over your boots. The water darkens the soil further, making the bones gleam in the lantern light like pale moons against a black sky. You bend close, fingertips hovering, feeling the pulse of history beneath. Your nails the team covers the skeletons with geotextile and soil. You pause to whisper a farewell. These bones, once discarded, now serve as voices for those the chronicles never named. You leave the trench changed, carrying the weight of their stories in your bones. Reminders that beneath polished stones and perfumed halls, every human life, no matter how humble, leaves an indelible mark on the world that I in the half-light of the trench, nestled among bone shards and broken tile. lies a small cluster of objects that sing of ritual and hope. You lean in, fingertips trembling, as the lead archaeologist gently lifts each artifact onto a velvet-lined tray. There, a bone needle, its shaft smoothed by centuries of handling. There, a shard of polished flint, its edge sharpened to an almost surgical point. And there, a faded leather pouch, cracked at the seams but still holding mysteries within. You lift the bone needle, studying the tiny eye once threaded with linen. It must have pierced flesh, not cloth, a tool of healing rather than sewing. You imagine a medieval practitioner, perhaps a monk trained in herbal lore or a woman known as the healer, using this slender instrument to lance abscesses, drain infections, or cauterize wounds. Each tap of the needle against the proximal bone leaves microscopic striations, now preserved as echoes of desperate compassion. Beside it, the flint shard feels alive in your palm, its edge catching the lantern light in a jagged glint. It is too precise for butchery. Its bevel suggests incision, not slaughter. You trace the curve where it once sliced flesh, thinking of apprentices leaning over cold bodies under torchlight, chanting prayers to keep both tool and patient safe. The flint's smooth surface bears faint stains, perhaps iron from blood, perhaps resin from a makeshift handle once bound with animal sinew. The leather pouch draws your gaze most of all. With careful scissors, the team opens it, revealing a handful of herbal fragments: rue's curled leaves, yarrow's faded florets, tansy's brittle blossoms. These are not simple spices. They are bitter wards against fever, poultices against infection. You rub a fragment between your fingers and inhale its sharp earthiness, imagining the healer grinding it into paste, whispering invocations to saints. As mortar met pestle, within the pouch you also find a small vial of glass, so thin it seems impossible to have survived. It contains a dark liquid, perhaps a tincture of wormwood or the dregs of a bile-based elixir used to purge toxins. The vial's stopper, once sealed with wax, now lies shattered, its fragments like carnelian petals. You sense the weight of trust placed in this vessel, the patient's fate balanced on the fragile neck of glass. Nearby, the archaeologists uncover a wooden box, now reduced to faint imprints in the clay soil. They pour water into the imprint, and a pale grain fills. A small cavity, resin from pines, used as glue or antiseptic. You contemplate how the healer combined resin's protective properties with rue's bitterness and flint's precision, orchestrating cures from the very chaos of nature. Legends swirl around such finds. Local lore tells of a white-handed healer who tended plague victims in secret, her hands unmarked by the disease she fought. They say she carved her tools from holy relics, sanctifying each before use. Scholars argue over her identity: a Benedictine sister exiled for her unorthodox methods, or a peasant woman whose cures rivaled those of licensed physicians. The objects in your hand bear no inscriptions to confirm either tale, only the silent evidence of her practice. Night falls as the team catalogs the implements. They wrap each in layers of acid-free cloth, sealing them in canvas pouches for transport. You watch, awed by the reverence in every gesture, sensing that these tools bridge centuries of suffering and solace. In the flicker of lantern light, you almost see the healer's silhouette, a figure bent over a patient's cot, murmuring pleas for mercy even as her needle glints like prayer. You stand and trace a line in the earth where the tools lay, a thin scar across damp soil. It reminds you of the delicate incision made by bone and flint, a cut that brought both pain and potential for relief. You taste ash on your lips, remembering your own attempts at cleansing under the ash tree. But here, beneath the weight of history, you realize that healing and hygiene have long been entwined in ritual and necessity. As the archaeologists cover the station and extinguish lanterns, you step back, heart heavy with both awe and sorrow. These tools speak of lives teetering between despair and hope, of hands trembling as they sought to ease fevered bodies in worlds without soap or steam. The healer's tools rest now in silence, but their story endures, etched in bone, bound in leather, and whispered by the soil itself. In the darkness, you depart the trench, leaving behind the tools that once carried the promise of relief. Above you, the abbey's spires rise like silent sentinels, their stones unaware of the lives unearthed beneath. You carry with you a single truth, that even in the darkest chapters of medieval life, where filth was common and fear was king, there existed souls brave enough to wield bone and flint and herbs in defiance of decay. Dawn's pale light reveals a narrow trench carved beside the abbey's outer wall, where patterns in the soil betray more than simple grave digging. Here, in a shallow pit lined with baked clay, lie dark circles of charcoal and chalk, evidence of a ritual more arcane than burial. You step carefully between stakes marking the perimeter, feeling the hum of silence as archaeologists brush away. Centuries of dust, at first glance, the pit appears a refuse heap, broken pottery, animal bones, fragments of wood. Yet the pieces are arranged with unsettling intention. A broken pot stands inverted, its rim pressed against the earth. Beside it, a scattering of animal teeth, sheep, goat, maybe a dog, form a crude arc. Trowels uncover a ring of stones, each roughly the same size, placed like sentinels guarding a secret. The lead archaeologist lowers a lantern to illuminate a cluster of symbols carved into a sandstone slab at the pit's edge. A circle bisected by a vertical line, a trident shape, a series of dashes reminiscent of tally marks. These glyphs are neither Latin nor runic. They belong to a vernacular language of ritual, an unrecorded dialect of belief, where water and waste, faith and fear, converge. You crouch, brushing soil from a shard of pottery embossed with a fish motif, a symbol of life and baptism. Across from it lies a daub of ochre, its red pigment fresh against the gray clay. Was this once part of a ceremony to cleanse sinners, using earth's blood to wash away human defilement? Or was it an offering, blood for blood, cast into the pit to appease forces of contagion? The team reveals more, a rusted iron bucket, its lip bent inward as if forced into the earth, filled with decomposed reeds and willow branches. Willow is known for its antiseptic bark. Its presence here suggests not mere disposal, but a purposeful infusion of healing properties. The reeds, soft, fibrous, may have lined a makeshift bier or served as wicks for smoldering fires meant to purify the air. A deeper scoop brings to light a cluster of small, polished stones, river pebbles rubbed smooth by water. They lie in a ring around a central patch of darker soil, the earth itself blackened by organic waste. This circle reads like a threshold. Cross it, and you enter a zone of contamination. Stand outside, and you remain untainted. It is a physical boundary, drawn in the ground, a sanitation line centuries before modern sewers. You imagine villagers bringing their chamber pots to the edge of consecrated ground, lifting contents to this pit, and then retreating behind the pebble circle, believing their sins, both bodily and spiritual, would remain trapped. Perhaps a priest sprinkled holy water over the refuse, uttering prayers to bind the filth within the stones, to keep its pestilent power from spreading. Yet this ritual's remnants carry no record of a church sanction. Instead, the pagan echoes linger, in the arrangement of stones and the scattering of teeth. Nearby, a human skull emerges, tilted, jaw open. Inside its cavity rests a single silver denier, tarnished but intact. A coin buried with the dead? Or a bribe to unseen spirits? Payment for safe passage through the boundaries of life and death? The teeth around it, animal teeth fashioned into amulets, suggest a desperate plea, silver for spirit, bone for balm. The dead, it seems, could be called upon as intermediaries in this ritual of refuse and redemption. Rain begins to patter on your cloak, the droplets whispering against the earth as if eager to cleanse the scene. The archaeologists hurriedly cover the pit with tarpaulin, their notes scrawled with questions. Sanitation ritual? Boundary magic? Unofficial burial practice? Each query is a testament to how little medieval lives can be pieced together from shards and symbols. Stepping back, you survey the landscape. The abbey's walls rise behind you, their stones hewn by monks who sought order and purity. Below them, the ritual pit stands as a mirror, order drawn around chaos, purity forced upon filth. You think of the villagers who once circled these stones, performing gestures both sacred and profane, striving to contain what the abbey could not wash away. You crouch by a stake and trace your finger along one of the chalk lines. Rough, uneven, but deliberate. It feels alive, as though it pulses with the memory of incantations and splashes of water. You close your eyes and hear the echo of chanting, the hiss of steaming water poured over ashes, the murmur of fear and faith entwined. Above ground, monks chant in Latin, their voices rising in unison. Below, the refuse pit continues its silent recitation, speaking in symbols and soil. Both rituals, chapel prayers and pit ceremonies, seek to master the same element, water, the life source that also carries corruption. One blesses it. The other traps its torment. As you stand, the rain intensifies, washing over the ground, erasing footprints and softening the chalk lines. The stones glisten, stones that once guarded the filth of human bodies now shine in the new light. You wonder if the ritual worked, if ritual boundaries truly contain disease, or if they merely delayed its spread. The archaeologists pack away their tools, and you step aside as they raise the tarpaulin. You cast a final glance at the pit, a ring of stones around a shared anxiety, a pebble border drawn in defiance of decay. You lift your cloak and walk toward the abbey's main gate, the bells tolling as if marking the boundary between worlds. The world of the living and the world of the defiled. In this pit, you've witnessed how medieval minds wrestled with hygiene, not through sewers and baths alone, but through ritual and symbol. They mixed faith and filth, hoping to sanctify what they could not cleanse. And as you pass beneath the abbey's archway, you carry with you the understanding that, in an age without soap or sewer, magic and ceremony were as vital as water itself. In the eternal struggle against decay, beyond the ritual pit, a narrow crawl space leads beneath the abbey's chapter house, an oubliette sealed for centuries until modern trowels pried its stones apart. You slip down into dim light, dust motes, swirling like tiny pilgrims in the beam of a headlamp. The air is heavy with chalk and cold, and the weight of silence presses against your chest. In the center lies a crumbled wax tablet, its wooden frame warped by moisture, yet intact enough to cradle the fragile writing surface. Alongside it, a monk's skeleton slumps against the wall, knees drawn to his chest, arms splayed as if in prayer. A rosary of carved bone beads encircles his wrist, the cross missing, its absence as poignant as the words he failed to record. You kneel before the tablet. The wax is scored with tiny grooves, letters begun, strokes hesitated, the ghost of a script never finished. With a soft brush, you clear millennia of dust, revealing the faint outline of a single word, memento, but the rest is gone, wiped smooth by time, or perhaps erased by trembling fingers. The scribe's quill, a goose feather hardened and sharpened, lies shattered at his feet. The monk's skull bears a thin crack across the parietal bone, suggesting a fall or blow. You imagine him slipping in the cloister's shadows, quill in hand, wax tablet under arm, seeking sanctuary in this hidden alcove. Did he carry heresy, confession, or dire news he could not bring himself to voice? Did fear or devotion drive him here, to write and then to silence his own words? At his side, you discover a small stack of parchment scraps, brittle and discolored. Under careful hands, the fragments reveal Latin prayers for the dying, interspersed with marginal notes. Cleanse, release, purify, the margins blur. Where tears dissolved ink. In places, candle wax dripped, sealing sorrow like a reliquary. You read one prayer aloud softly, its syllables resonating in the vaulted subfloor. O fons aquae vivificans, wash the stain, wash the stain. Grant me passage beyond filth and flame. You close the fragments and turn to study the monk's bones. His hands curve as if pressed in eternal benediction. His ribs flare outward, as though his lungs strained for breath he could not sustain. His collarbone bears a series of fine cut marks, signs of ritual purification, knife drawn across the flesh to release impurities. You sense that his body, too, was subject to the same obsessive quest for purity that drove him to the edge of life. On the wall above his head, you make out chalk marks, an uneven grid of tally marks, scratched in haste. Countless strokes trace the passage of days. 1, 2, 3. Each stroke a prayer, a penance, a plea. You press your finger against the grid. Each mark is an echo of hope, a heartbeat of ritual that kept him tethered to both earth and heaven. A small alcove behind the skeleton reveals a clay pipe and a broken rosary bead, tokens hastily stowed, perhaps intended as tools for warding off plague or despair. Near them lie fragments of barley bread, now petrified, food for the journey, or sustenance for a soul condemned to solitude. The kernel edges still show indentations from his teeth, as though he clutched the bread until the last bite. You study the clay pipe, its bowl encrusted with soot and resinous residue. Though smoking is anachronistic for a medieval monk, you recognize the pipe as a later insertion. Someone came, long after his death, to leave a token of remembrance or defiance. It suggests that this monk's story resonated beyond his era, drawing wanderers who sought to complete his narrative with their own offerings. As you rise, you brush away loose stones, careful not to disturb the hollow beneath his chin. The plaster floor around him is stained with dark patches, perhaps remnants of spilled wine used for nightly vigils, or the seepage of Earth's own fluids reclaiming human effort. You feel the hush of centuries envelop you, as though the walls themselves hold their breath. You cover the monk's remains with a layer of geotextile, marking the spot for later memorial. You place the quill and wax tablet aside, wrapping them in acid-free cloth, preserving the agony of his incomplete thought. You step back, head bowed in unspoken tribute to a man who sought to record, to cleanse, to pray, yet met only silence in return. Climbing upward, you emerge into the abbey's cloister garden, where roses bloom amid neatly trimmed hedges. The fragrance of petals drifts on the breeze, incongruous with the dank air you've left behind. Monks glide past in unreadable calm, their habits brushing dew-laced grass as they head toward morning prayer. You carry the memory of the hidden monk. With you, his half-finished writing, his tally of days, his silent plea for purification. In his failure to complete the word, you see the ultimate paradox of medieval hygiene, a desire for cleansing so intense that it swallowed speech itself. And in his silence, you hear the loudest testament that even the most devout could not fully reconcile the body's frailty with the soul's demands. That as you depart, you turn for one last glance. The hidden alcove's entrance is a dark rectangle beneath the chapter house, a wound in the earth marking a life suspended between faith and filth. You whisper the one word preserved on his tablet, memento, and vow to remember. Night has fallen over the abbey grounds, but your lantern casts long shadows across the open trench where the dead lie. By torchlight, you survey the scattered remains and artifacts, wondering who among them was deemed worthy of ritual and remembrance, and who was left to rot in silence. Your gaze drifts to a shallow grave on the trench's edge. Unlike the mass burial pit, this grave is bordered by carefully laid stones, slabs of limestone sourced from church foundations. Inside, a single skeleton rests on its back, arms folded across the chest, as if in repose. Around the skull lie fragments of a gilded manuscript page, letters in gold leaf still clinging to vellum. Someone placed these once precious pages as a grave good, an offering of words and artistry to honor the dead. You crouch to inspect the bones. They are slender, a youth, perhaps 15 or 16 years old, cut down before adolescence could bloom. The teeth are unworn, the epiphyses not fully fused. Yet this child was deemed worthy, afforded a private burial, sacred stones, and gilded words. Who was this soul? A novice scribe? A youth of privilege lost to fever? The manuscript fragments whisper of literacy, an education denied to most peasants. That a few paces away lies another skeleton, unadorned and face down in the mud. No stones, no offerings, only bone pressed against earth. You trace its outline, limbs twisted, ribs splayed as though the body fell in haste. This was a commoner or an outcast, buried with the refuse. No prayer, no token to mark a life. You press your hand to the soil above it, feeling the weight of anonymity. Who decides which lives merit memory and which are consigned to oblivion? Your light catches on a third burial, a woman's skeleton curled gently as though rocked to sleep. At her side sits a small wheel, a fragment of a spinning distaff carved from you. A few broken flax fibers cling to its grooves. You imagine her life, spinning thread for linen, weaving warmth for her children, her hands forever bound to the work of survival. No gilded pages here, yet she, too, earned a careful interment, her labor recognized in the wheel's silent testament. The contrast confounds you. Gold leaf for a youth, linen for a spinner, nothing for the rest. The boundaries of worth are etched in bone and soil. The wealthy youth was celebrated in death. The midwife's tools speak of service saved only by chance. The majority remain nameless, their burials as utilitarian as their lives. You step back and let the lantern's glow sweep across the trench. Ritual pit, mass graves, singled-out burials, all speak of a community wrestling with value, who merited ceremony, who merited seclusion, who merited only a ditch. Here, worth was measured not by character, but by rank, gender, age, and utility. The abbey's prelates may have preached equality before God, but the earth reveals a harsher hierarchy beside the youth's grave. You notice shallow footprints, perhaps those of a mourner who knelt to pray. You step into the prints and feel the ground sink beneath your weight. In that hollow shape, you sense a moment of grief, personal, intimate, unrecorded. The mourner left no token, no inscription. Yet the footprints bear witness to a life loved, however briefly. You press your fingertips into the limestone border of the youth's grave, feeling the carved edge. It echoes the church's promise of salvation, stone raised against decay, gold laid against darkness. But even stone weathers. You brush away a flake of mortar and watch it drift into the mud, as gold dust would in wind. All markers fade. Even the richest offerings dissolve into time that a sudden breeze stirs the trench, carrying the scent of herbs from the healer's tools. Rue and yarrow drift, mingling with damp earth and bone. You inhale deeply, tasting sweetness amid decay. It reminds you that worth is not solely conferred by wealth or station, but also by acts of care, herbs gathered for the sick, tools fashioned for healing, labor offered without expectation of reward. You move to the mass burial pit and peer over. Its edge, thousands lie together, no boundaries, no tokens. Their worth recorded only in soil strata and osteological markers. They were villagers, laborers, perhaps victims of plague or famine. Their bones whisper that worth can be fragile, erased by contagion and hunger. Yet in death, they share a collective dignity, interred by archaeologists rather than left to stray. Drawing a plank across the trench, you sit and rest the lantern on your knee. You study your reflection in its glass. Dirt-streaked face, weary eyes, the same questions etched beneath your skin. What makes a life meaningful? What makes it worthy of remembrance? The stones and bones offer no clear answer, merely evidence of human impulse to honor some. Ignore others. As the lantern gutter flickers, you imagine a future in which these stories are woven together. The youth, the spinner, the healer, the monk, the nameless dead. A tapestry that honors each thread, regardless of its shimmer. Perhaps, in recording these lives, archaeology grants worth where history withheld it. Rescuing voices from the silence of soil, you rise, extinguishing the lantern's flame. In the darkness, you follow the trench's perimeter, stepping carefully past graves both grand and humble, tracing a silent vow. You will carry their stories forward, not only those gilded with gold, but also those marked only by mud and footprint. You will speak their names, even if for you they are strangers, because worth, once buried, deserves to be unearthed. Leaving the trench behind, you ascend the winding path toward the abbey gate. The silhouettes of monks pass before torchlight. In the cloister, you pause, listening to their chant, a single note rising, unwavering against the night. In that chant you hear the unity you seek, the shared pulse of breath, bone, and memory. You step beneath the archway, carrying with you the question of worth, determined that no life, no matter how humble, will remain silent on your watch. She left no name, no title, no monument in polished marble, only the curve of a broken shard. The whisper of herbs pressed between pages, the hollow echo of bones laid to rest in clay. Yet in the quiet darkness beneath the abbey's stones, her story endures, spoken by soil and skeleton alike. You stand on the threshold of that hidden world, where every fragment, from the healer's needle to the monk's unfinished prayer, carries the weight of lives lived on the edge of survival. The earth has swallowed laughter, tears, filth, and faith, and now offers them back in pigments, tally marks, and worn tools. Here, in the stillness, you learn that history's truest voices are buried in the margins, in the refuse pits and secret chambers. Their worth is measured not by gold or grandeur, but by the resonance of their silence, the testament of their touch upon the world. And as you turn away from the trench, earth closing behind you, stones settling into memory, you carry their legacy forward, a promise that even the most forgotten among us will speak again, woven into the tapestry of time where silence becomes song.